Hello, everybody. Welcome to December 12th Gateway API meeting. Keep in mind, as always, this is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which boils down to be nice to one another. Don't be rude. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and get started on our agenda for today. We have a couple of follow-up items that came from the previous meeting. The first one, I should probably share my screen. You guys see that okay?
Maybe if you can zoom in a bit, that would help me out at least, but otherwise, yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right, so one of the follow-up items from last week was we talked about moving to priority labels. There was some complaints about basically understanding like how things land and how we want them to land across releases and stuff like that. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Should we just do it?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's just need to find someone that has time to do it, but no complaints from me.
Yep. Notably, I think you will need to be a Kubernetes org, like Kubernetes SIG's org member to be able to label.
Yep.
Aside from that, yes, anyone should. Yeah, it definitely seems like a thing to do over the quiet period coming up.
Okay, sounds good. Does anybody want to take that as an action then? Because unless somebody has something else to say, that sounds pretty, I'm +1 for it.
Cool.
Anybody want to take that as an action item? And it will be me.
SARS does Proud not support some sort of /command to assign priority for non-members? Maybe, I don't remember.
Yeah, there's I'll find a link, but there's a number of things that Proud does for non-members, for members. Yeah, I'll find a link, but it's a confusing set of things that you have to be different levels to achieve.
Roger that. I'll figure it out. All right. Another follow-up from last week. Looks like we had an update here since I posted it. TLS route termination discussion. So there was some discussion last week about some people might want TLS route to actually do termination. We were kind of unclear on that. We decided we would do a follow-up. Candice added the TLS use cases. Is there anything else to say on this, Candice, or Nick?
This is Candice. I thought we were talking about Nick's TLS use cases document. Is that not what this TLS route termination discussion was referring to?
This one was about, is there any reason why when you're doing TLS route and routing on SNI, you would want to terminate the TLS connection when you're only routing using the SNI? We were like, I don't think so. And that's why, so yeah, that's why I think we sort of moved, but we didn't get to it. That said, this definitely has kind of stalled. I haven't had a lot of chance to give it a little bit more loving, but I think that I did think of 2 use cases that aren't in there that I'll try and add today. Yeah, but I think the point of that was just to sort of get everybody to be like, if you're using TLS in Gateway API, can you have a read through there and yeah, have a think about if you have a use case that's not covered, and so that we can just try and make sure that we're that we're not missing something when we talk about TLS. Yeah, so the use cases are not actually too theoretical. That's like, we haven't recorded I want to use a client certificate on the listener and a couple of other things like that. And I want to encrypt communications between the gateway and the gateway and the backend without encrypting them on the outside of the listener. So yeah, I'll update that today.
But are they related or are they not related? What we wanted to follow up today?
They're not related to what we wanted to follow up today. The one we wanted to follow up today is, so TLS route is designed for when you want to route traffic only based on the SNI in the TLS connection, not based on anything in the headers or anything that you need inspection of the traffic for. And so the question is, in the case of TLS route, is there any utility in supporting terminate at all? Because if you're terminating TLS and only routing on the SNI, then it's like, why? I don't see any reason to do that. When if you're terminating TLS, you have the ability to route based on anything in a HTTP connection or anything else about the connection. So yeah, that's the open question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what do we do as far as following up on that? Does anybody want to make a pitch for it? Do we just kind of hang on and wait for somebody to come back? What's the action to take, if any?
It feels like a lazy consensus kind of thing. Maybe the action here is that I put a thing in Slack saying explaining TLS route. You're explaining TLS route again and saying right now TLS route allows termination, but I don't think that makes sense. And lazy consensus is lazy consensus here is I will remove references to TLS route supporting termination from across the API unless someone can explain to me why you need it.
But Shane, just to point out that that action item goes under the previous
Yeah. I think you just
subsection
that's
here.
I'll fix
Yep.
it. It's fine.
I'm trying to move it, and all of a sudden my whole. Who works at Google? Can you fix this? What is going
I'll
on
get
with
right
this
on
thing? It
it.
just froze up. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Just froze right up on me. All right.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Do we have anything more to say on this topic, or are we solid?
Yeah,
I have
we're
a
good.
question. Yeah, I have a question. Maybe I don't remember. For the search, if you want to bring your own search, that's under the TLS configuration. Is that a true statement or that's not really right?
Yes, it is. It is true. That is, if you want to bring your own cert and terminate TLS at the gateway. If you want to bring your own cert and run the TLS inside the workload, so that the gateway is not actually like unwrapping the TLS and doing things with the TLS, then that's what TLS route is for. It's for when you pass the TLS through the gateway without doing anything with it. That's what TLS route is for.
Got it. So without taking, so the previous one still exists. I still can specify if I wanted to. Okay, got it. Just want to make sure. That's the case.
No, thanks for asking. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, TLS readiness for TLS pass through. Yes, thanks, Brian. That's the way to put it. Does anyone else have any questions here about that? It kind of pokes me again that we probably need to do a little bit of a tidy up on the docs around like I'm doing TLS and what do I use? But that's what the TLS use cases doc is for. So if you're using TLS and you have questions, can you have a look through that use cases doc and just check that we describe everything you need to know about what you want to do with TLS. That would be really useful. Thanks.
Roger that. All right. Moving forward. So Rushi, who is on the call, joined us several months ago and started looking for things to do. Basically was interested in contributing. It can be a little bit challenging to contribute when you don't have an implementation you're actively working on. So like wanting to contribute, but not necessarily wanting to jump into any specific implementation makes it hard to contribute to Gateway API, or at least that was the experience we had. I tried to find him some stuff. For those of you who don't know, Bleakst is a project that's being donated to Kubernetes SIGs for Gateway API for the purpose of being a reference implementation and for testing only. And Rushi recently helped to implement the UDP route controller for it. So we have a demo today. A few things have changed and we'll kind of talk about some of those, but we have a demo today of doing end-to-end UDP route without any fanciness. It's all working now. Go ahead, take it away, Rushi. I'll stop sharing the screen.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Please let. I think I probably will need to enable it, Shane. I'm unable to share.
You're not able to share. Okay, I'll fix it. Hang on. I think that'll do it.
Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Okay, I'll try my best to demo it in like very good way. Shane did most of the work. I did some sort of things. So if something goes wrong, leave it to Shane. Okay. For a question, Shane. So yeah, basically we kind of did like list was to get UDP implemented. I tried to implement the controller, and Shane did the data plane part. So what we just wanted to demo it, like, you know, how it's even working. So I just have pull off some of terminals. So probably what I will do first is get started with maybe getting our data plane and control plane up. So in this one, please let me know if it's not visible. I was just telling it here. So I will go ahead and deploy probably our controller and a data plane, like the parts for data plane and controller. This is a data plane and the control manager. Okay, it's running. The second thing which we wanted to do was, once we have these two things running, probably I will just tail it so that we could maybe see the logs, what's happening in there. Sorry.
So just to add some color to it, it's deployed with customize right now. So that's all he did was just ran the customized deployment. And then the top terminal there is the control plane logs, and the bottom will be the data plane logs.
Yeah, this started. We'll just deploy like a sample UDP route server, which will simply just echo our command. Again, thanks to Shane. This is just a simple server which is just echoing it probably. Yeah, and we'll go ahead and we'll add a gateway route. Gateway first. We'll install the CRDs. So just to take a look, it's just a simple gateway class and a gateway, and telling it that okay, it's Kong to Blixty. And we'll also go ahead and add UDP route for it.
You'll want to watch the logs for the UDP server.
Yeah, I'll put it in this terminal probably. Oh yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So it's listening on 9x5. The server we just spent up, and this is a UDP route. Oh wait, okay, it's being configured. I think it picked up. We'll just check once if we have gateway. Yeah, okay, Blixty. So, and probably I will just simply do a netcat just to see, okay, the UDP route it's working and it's going through, so that we know, like, you know, the whole thing or the demo which we are trying to do is working. Before that, yeah, the gateway is there. Should I show anything specific, Shane, before like we doing maybe netcat or something like that, or you want to add up?
Not really. It's just pretty. This one's pretty basic, thankfully. The last one had a lot of like extra steps. So the gateway's up. It's got an IP address. The controller saw it, and then you added the UDP route. Did you already add the UDP route?
Yeah, I added the UDP route. Yeah, configured.
It was mad about it. Okay. No, that's the. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. So then something might have gone wrong because
And
the control plane should have been telling you something about that UDP route.
sorry,
It's okay.
it's being
I think
deleted.
I think you might have had a previous one that was being deleted, like before the demo. You just force delete. There's probably a finalizer issue.
Yeah.
You can do a -- force on the end of that, and it'll do it. So Control C that, and then just goodbye. Okay, then just Control C that. Give it another shot.
Okay.
Up another apply. Oh, maybe not. Something's wrong. So something has gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, let's try. Probably. Yeah, something has gone wrong.
Gods were not kind to you today.
Sorry.
The demo gods were not kind to you
Yeah,
today.
exactly. I should have summoned that demo.
It's okay. It's okay. That stuff happens. I'm kind of curious now, actually, what went wrong, because it would have seemed like we'll have to check it out. I think it has something to do with cruft left over from a previous run that isn't being cleaned up properly. So, but the long and short of it is that you can go ahead and play with that, and I'll talk for a second. The long and short of it is that in the previous demo, we were using Go, C and eBPF with Cilium Go, basically. And this time we've rewritten it in Rust with Aya. Rust and the Aya framework actually have full support for TC, where eBPF doesn't. Or sorry, Cilium Go doesn't. So there was that happened for a couple of technical reasons, and also because we preferred Rust for other reasons too. The demo before used XDP. This one uses TC. If you're not familiar with that, these are different kinds of eBPF programs. XDP is like really, really low level. TC is higher level, and gives you access to more helper functions and things like that in the Linux kernel. And in this demo, we finally are at the point where we have like the end-to-end working without having to go in and do things like manually manipulate network interfaces and stuff like that. So that's kind of where the thing is at. And the next steps from here are, well, more or less adding an egress TC program and then adding TCP route support. So moving right along.
I'm trying to do something.
I wouldn't worry about it at this point, Rushi. We can demo it again like next Monday.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Stuff happens. It's not a big deal. Thank you for running the demo.
Sorry, I wasn't
for adding.
I wasn't trying to throw
route
stones.
controller.
Oh no, yeah, but probably that was the last time which I was trying. I did something. I messed it up, but I know I need to look at it now.
Yeah, no
It's
worries.
happened.
Cool. So does anybody have any questions about that? That's kind of been an ongoing thread in these meetings. So we just wanted to follow up and say where we were at. All right. In that case, let's get back to it. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the Gateway API code jam. This was something we added kind of for Blix, which is why it's right after. So the dog's having a bad day. So they added this to the SIG networking meeting for us, but basically Gateway API code jam is something that Andrew Stoikas and I wanted to add for kind of partially for the Blix group, but in general, just to be able to do like pair programming, kind of more or less formal chats and stuff like that. A place to come in and like bring a topic that's more technical and maybe more implementation detail oriented, so that we can sit down and actually look at things. I think for this Friday when it starts, so it'll be Friday every Friday at I think it's 11:30 a.m. It's on the SIG networking meeting. It's completely optional. It's not going to have any like normal or like normal Gateway API agenda. Is just going to be related to Gateway API for like bugs and just whatever else that we run into. And we'll try it for a while and see if people like that. So if you're interested, it's on the SIG Network calendar and it is free form. Feel free to bring agenda items if you'd like. Rob, go ahead with the V060 update.
Cool. Yeah, I think we finally are in the final stretches. There's a few comments left that we haven't addressed at this point, but some good progress in the past week. And I know I have a PR in progress. Well, not yet PR, but a branch in progress that should clear up some of these. talking with Shane and Nick, I think our goal is to have, the last few comments cleaned up and taken care of by tomorrow. Again, there's room to help, but I think we've got this under control now and should be able to get it out, get that stuff completed and resolved tomorrow. We have gotten okays from Tim and Cal to go ahead with an RC2 once that hits. So if we stay on schedule, that means RC2 should go out, let's say Tuesday or Wednesday Pacific time. At that point, again, we're going to rely very heavily on community here to, again, test out what we're calling release candidate 2 now. Ensure that if you are running conformance, that your conformance passes or has a path to conformance. Ensure that the changelog makes sense to you. There's nothing unexpected in there. And with that, I think we will be well on track to do a final V060 release shortly afterwards. But I think the minimum amount of time we've given between RC2 and final release is 2 days. I'd say that's probably going to be similar this time. It may be a bit longer since we'll be running up against a weekend. We'll see, but that's current timeline for V060.
Almost there. Almost. Cool. Let's do some triage. Oh yeah. I think everybody will have something to say about this one.
I figured this would be a good one to discuss. I have my own bias towards not using Helm chart to manage CRDs, at least not our CRDs. But I don't want to say too much because I'm very interested in what others think here.
Same. I share the bias, but I also really want to be open to people's needs. So I guess the question is, does anybody feel like can somebody explain like a really good use case for us having a Helm chart for some or all of our components?
Maybe maybe some temporizing things they can use a home chart. May help,
Yeah, I know, like right now we have some very minimal support for templatizing with customize. Well, we use customized in some cases. I don't know that it's meaningfully useful for templatizing the way we have it set up right now. But yeah, that is a good point. It would be useful to identify what values people might want to, template in and make those configurable. I expected there would be more strong opinions on Helm and CRDs. It's fine if there's not. I mean, that's great.
Some chat room stuff. Hang on.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Travis. Okay. Travis says +1 to keep it as customized. Can't really see where I need a chart. Everyone gets the same set of CRDs and you can express which of the channels you want through the single URL. Yeah. +1 to that. Okay, maybe we don't need to spend much more time on this then. I don't know if Wilson's actually here. So maybe we should come back around.
Yeah. I think let's wait to hear from Wilson again. I think that I think Wilson's looking for ways to help, and this seemed like a relatively obvious thing. I didn't even think when I first sort of like, yeah, okay, that sounds fine. I didn't even think about the fact that Helm is sort of explicitly like, hey, we can't do much about CRDs because you can only have one in a cluster, right? Like if you start including CRDs in Helm charts, what happens if you have two different Helm charts that want different versions of the same CRDs? The answer is you end up kind of screwed.
Yeah, CRDs and Helm charts are notorious. It's a notorious pain point.
Yeah, and it's not easily solvable either because to solve it requires like being able to have multiple versions of the same CRD, which is like really hard and probably not going to happen. And yeah, a bunch of other stuff like that.
My experience.
yes.
is-
Sorry.
In my
I
experience,
just want,
people
oh,
accidentally.
go ahead.
Oh, nice.
In my
You go
experience, I see people accidentally uninstalling CRDs a lot, and then that's regrettable.
Yeah, that's bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the worst. All right. So if anybody else is interested after the fact here, 1590 is the issue. Go put a comment on there with your stake in it.
There's a couple comments on Zoom chat.
I missed them.
First, it looks like there's a question of if this is a proposal to remove an existing option or just add a new one. Since this is a proposal to add a new one, we don't have any Helm support, at least any official Helm support today. Then Mike is suggesting that keeping charts as gateway, at gateway implementations seems to make more sense than owning them as the gateway API project itself. I think that I agree with that as well. So yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same page here. I just wanted to make sure those chats got called out.
I think the reason to add the chart would be if the implementations are building out charts, then they can link to a chart rather than import the entire YAML. So it's like a pointer. So you don't have to have the entire YAML embedded in that repo. So one less.
Yeah, the problem is that if we do that, then and two implementations are referencing different versions of the gateway API chart, then things will break in spectacular ways. And so like you can't, that means then like I understand what you're saying, but doing it with Helm charts and having a Helm chart means like puts versioning that's not handled well by the fact that CRDs can only have one version. So you can't, if you've got two Helm charts that want to install different versions of the gateway API Helm chart, that is not possible and will break things on one chart or another.
Yeah, I think the more I've been thinking about this, the more I want to tie CRD installation to something like that, a cluster admin kind of infrastructure level decision of when I'm provisioning this cluster, I'm going to include these add-ons, these CRDs. So I can imagine, some of the more popular cluster provisioners may start to include an option to include these CRDs. Again, I'm not sure, but that's kind of the level I feel like this makes more sense at than trying to bundle it with your implementation of API, because I think, that the compatibility there could get rather messy. On GKE, for example, you can just set a flag and we'll manage the CRDs for you. I hope that kind of experience becomes more widespread, but I don't know.
Indeed. Okay. So, yep, 1590 if you want to chime in. Assert observed generation is incremented in status conditions.
Okay, so
Right.
I added this one. I can't remember if this was discussed in much length previously, but it feels like, one, a good thing to do, and two, something that may break everyone's conformance tests. So I just wanted to highlight that this is coming. I think this is a good idea. But it means that we are going to expect and now assert in conformance that when you set a condition in status, it needs to have observed generation set, and not just set, but set to the generation of that resource that you've observed. So that's kind of point number one on this PR. Then point number two that I want to highlight is there's been some discussion. This was discussion in Slack as well that some may have noticed about if and how we should care about this on gateway class. My own opinion is probably not. So far in conformance, gateway class is an input, not something we're actually testing. It's just, the person or thing that's running conformance tests provides a gateway class that we run tests against. but we don't actually test the gateway class resource itself. And I'm not sure how meaningful observed generation would be on gateway class. So I've been thinking it doesn't make sense, but I don't know. I can see how, like, you can change description, for example, on a gateway class, and then but I don't know, that doesn't feel like it matters. Not everyone supports parameters ref, so yeah, I don't know.
I think that it's probably better to just, it's probably better to just require that we do it, because like that way, if we need to add it in the future, it's not a big change. If we add any extra fields to the gateway class at some point in the future, then we will need observed generation there. And just getting people used to the idea of, if you update the status, you include the observed generation, I think is a good idea. And we do need you to update the status for the gateway class to indicate that it's accepted. So I think it's just better that we say, if you update the status, you always update the observed generation, and we have conformance tests that will check that.
I think you're probably right. I guess my biggest question at this point is, for some implementations today, there's not much of a reason to watch gateway class or react to it, because there's not much of interest there. I can understand, like, the very first time when you set gateway class status to accepted, that should have an observed generation present. But the only other thing that I think we can modify today is description, and that's what this test does. And I feel like requiring a status bump when description changes doesn't really,
I hear what you're saying, but like, I think that because you need to be able to indicate which gateway class you are reconciling. Like, that is the reason that you do the status update to say that a gateway class is accepted. It could be that you are reconciling more than one, right? That's up to you, right? Like, but because you need to be able to do that, that means you need to be watching gateway classes, and you do need to be watching them for, I don't think we have marked a controller name as immutable. So that means that conceivably you could update a gateway class and change the controller name, which would mean that it would then fall out of scope. Which then you would need to update the thing. Like, so like we haven't ruled out some of these edge cases. So like, I agree that there's not a lot of utility, but either we need to update the spec so that that sort of thing is not possible, that a gateway class can't fall out of scope once it's in scope. Or we need to make sure that that all of this stuff is working correctly, I think. I understand what you're saying. I agree that like, it's not adding much for a lot of implementations, but like, equally not guaranteeing this with conformance tests, I feel like is a thing that absolutely will bite us in the future if we don't do it.
I think John raised an interesting point in chat that, is gateway class immutable? And I know we've had kind of, I don't know if we've clearly defined, I think what we've defined is that gateway class as a resource should be treated as a template. So when a gateway class changes, it affects future gateways created with that gateway class.
Yep.
But not pre-existing gateways.
So that's all fine except for the controller name update, right? Like, so if you update controller name, that changes which gateways are in scope, right? Like, because if you change the controller name from, project contour.io to /contour to, GKE gateway API implementation, then that means that all of those gateways under there now belong to, it's the same as creating another gateway class that does that, right? Like, and the old implementation needs to drop support for it, and the new one needs to start reconciling it.
So I did just verify that controller name in gateway class is something that we have intended immutability, with the webhook validation. So we have webhook validation that will cover that. Obviously, webhook validation is not perfect. It can be bypassed. It may not exist. But the intent is that field is supposed to be immutable.
Yeah.
obviously people can change it. They can do a delete, recreate, whatever. I don't know. I want to think about this more. I think it makes tons of sense on gateway and HTTP route. I'm just struggling to find.
So I guess in my mind, the reason that I'm saying it the way I am is if we don't say you have to include the observed generation on this, then then the status is no longer reliable, right? Like, like the observed generation is just a little checksum that says that, everything is good. The version that you're seeing is the version that was last updated, right? Like the other reason for observed generation is, okay, so you have I am running a controller implementation. The controller implementation picks up a gateway class and observes it fine and marks it down as all good. And then, but we do support params ref, right? And so and then I shut down the gateway, my implementation, and start it up with a new version. And now it doesn't support the same params ref or something, right? Like, or something's broken, or it doesn't see the gateway class for some reason. And then because the accepted thing doesn't have a observed generation, then it means that you don't know that the status is up to date. Like that's the point of the observed generation, is to make sure that if anything changes in the resource, then you know that the status is consistent with the spec of the resource. And because the observed generation is done by the API server, you can't fudge it. I think the question you're saying is it useful for us to allow any changes to the spec of gateway class? And I'm like, well, yeah, that is an interesting question, but fact is it's a Kubernetes object and spec changes are allowed. So we should, Yeah.
And I think I definitely agree that observed generation should be set. Where I'm struggling is if observed generation needs to be incremented on what I view as a no-op update. So in my case, changing description, which is the only thing we can test right now, changing description feels like a no-op update that it's never going to have a meaningful difference for the controller. And so requiring that a controller bump observed generation in that case feels a little funny. I don't know. Go ahead, Shane.
I'm with Nick on this one, but it's not a hill I want to die on. So I'm kind of like, I think we could spend it sounds like we are pretty divided on this. So it really comes down to who wants to die on what hill. And I'm not going to die on the hill. So if we really want to take it out, I'm okay with taking it out just for the purposes of moving forward. But it seems to me like what Nick said is true. It's like, we're probably going to need it eventually. It's more correct to do it. It's more actually correct. And in the case of Kong, we have one implementation that actually uses parameters ref, and it's not unheard of to change the gateway class. So some bias, I suppose, too.
Micah, you've got a hand?
Yeah, I'm a little confused by some of the discussion. So I want to make sure I heard correctly something very important that I thought I heard Nick say. So I thought Nick said the idea here is if you update status, then you update observed generation. I interpret that as if and only if. So if someone updates description and that doesn't result in the controllers needing to update status, then there's no reason you would need to increment observed generation, right? Only if you actually change the status condition or something. That's when you update observed generation.
That is true.
What? Okay, so that
is true to some extent, but what I'm actually saying, Micaiah, is that no, in the case that the generation has changed, if you see an update for the thing and the generation has changed, you really need to apply the status again to say, hey, yeah, as of this generation, this status still applies. So even if you update the description, which is a no-op in terms of accepted, in terms of changing whether or not accepted has taken effect, you need to update the status again because that's what the observed generation is. It's a checksum that the status has been written to take into account the same thing. Rob's point I think is, hey, the description change is not really status affecting, so you can end up incrementing the spec and incrementing the generation, and then having to write another status update because it's not, that doesn't change. There's no way it can change. But I'm saying like that's fine as long as it's only description. But like if we add any other fields in the future, or if it's params ref, which is very relevant, then you need to be sure that you're seeing the most current version of the thing. Does that?
I guess. Is it like a huge distinction, Rob, if we increment it, if description changes? I'm just trying to understand what the trade-off is.
No,
Because they
I
add the
don't.
special case, which is kind of annoying. Like you have to treat it specially.
No, I agree. This specific conformance test is the first conformance test where we're actually testing anything about gateway class other than that there's an accepted condition set. In this case, we're actually taking an input provided from the conformance tester and modifying it. So our conformance test today expect that you have created a gateway class for us, and now we're making some action, taking some kind of thing to modify that gateway class. In this case, we're modifying description. And then as a result of that, we are expecting that you bump status condition observed generation. I think that's fine. I just want to be very, very clear that, like, I think it's similar to what Micaiah is asking too, that what we're expecting now is anytime anything changes, even if it's a no-op, like even if someone annotates, I don't know if annotations are going to bump observed generation, but anything that bumps generation, yeah, it depends on the resource. Anything that bumps generation is going to require a controller to bump all the observed generations in status, which for any controller not already doing that is going to be significantly more writes to API server.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
But if we're not doing that, then you can't be sure that the status that you're seeing applies to the version that you're seeing. Like that's what observed generation is for. Like if you, so it's one of the things I think I've always felt like observed generation is currently an optional field in the struct in upstream, but I've got the impression from the API machinery folks a couple of times that the only reason it is that they added it after and they couldn't make it default. Otherwise they would have made it so it's required. Like the only reason it's optional is because it was added later. Sorry, Micaiah, you got your hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Micaiah.
I'm splitting hairs, but
no, go ahead. And then we're getting close to 10 minutes, so we should probably take this async after this.
okay,
Go ahead.
I'll just say it seems like we're conflating two things. There's the requirement, if you update status, you must update observed generation. And there's the requirement, if this thing, description, whatever changes, then you must update status. So I feel like we're conflating those two.
So yeah, so I think we are to some extent, but the problem is that when you update description, because it's a field in the spec, that updates the generation. That is not optional. The API server does that for you. Like there's no way around that. And so if we're mandating that generation updates equal status updates, then it is possible that doing stuff like updating description will require a status update because of the fact that the API server auto increments the generation, and that is not optional. So that's why we're conflating them, is because if we enforce observed generation updates on generation updates, then that's what will happen. Like there's no way around that. Does that make sense,
right.
Micaiah?
Yeah, I tried to capture your comment, Micaiah, and I couldn't. So if you want to throw that in there, well, I kind of forgot what it was that we were saying we were conflating.
I can fill that in if I can find the right tab. It's like
Okay, thank you.
to update observed generation if you update status, and the requirement to update status if you update description.
Roger
I think
that.
you can argue those two independently. They make sense to me independently. So I guess if you want to conflate them, yeah.
Yeah, it's not that I want to conflate them. It's that we're forced to conflate them, right? Like the fact that updating description will update the generation, right? Like that is not optional. And so what we're saying is if we are requiring that, It's not just when you update status, you have to update observed generation. It's if the generation on the spec, on the object updates, you must update status to ensure that the observed generation matches the thing, even if that status was update was a no op.
Gotcha. So it seems like this this one could go on a bit, and we're getting down to about 10 minutes. So it seems to me like maybe we should say this thread is where we should continue.
Sure.
Just trying to check for time because I think we have a couple things left. All right. So yeah, if you have more to say on that, this thread, issue or pull request number 1586. Next item, the adding the migration guide from Ingress. I remember this one. So yeah, I think what this was, what was the just bringing this up for people to kind of keep in mind this is here.
Yeah, I ran through and went through the most recently updated PRs and issues. This was one of them. Mikhail went through and responded to most all of the feedback. So this is really just ready for another round of review. I think this is a really important topic. So if anyone has extra cycles, I think many of us are familiar with the process of going from Ingress to Gateway. So if you can help contribute, help review this, that would be really great. But I think it's an important guide for us.
I'll take another look at that. I thought I had just approved it, but apparently I did not. So I will take another look in particular, but yeah, please do jump in. This is going to be a sort of almost like a landing page for some people. Very important document. So as many extra views and thumbs up as we can get, or requests for changes. Cool. So maybe there's not much more to say about that unless anybody has something. Pretty straightforward. So that concludes triage, actually faster than I thought. Rob, do you mind? Rushi just PM'd me that he got the last little bit working. It should probably take just a couple of seconds. Can we let Rushi give it another go?
Oh yeah, sure.
Go for it, Rushi.
I hope it'll work now.
If it doesn't work the second time after you got it working, it's okay. Don't worry.
I'm just gonna shut down the Zoom and pretend that it's not working. Okay.
Yeah, just disconnect. Just pull your Ethernet. No. It's okay.
So, okay. Yeah, we are at a point where UDP route was not implemented. We have logs from just to show the UDP server. This is from the controller and this is from the data plane. Just revise. So I'm just gonna go ahead and apply the UDP route right now. And before that, maybe even we could see, okay, this is not going right now. So apply the UDP route just created, it picked up. And the simple like echo test, just to revisit again, the IP for gateway is the same one, I guess. Yeah, it's 1800. So we're just gonna do naked on it actually. Okay, if we see it's popping up here, it's receiving, this is receiving, and the whole thing is working fine, I guess.
Cool. Thank you, Rushi. Appreciate you contributing to that.
This was a small demo, but I hope we got it.
Redemption.
Working.
Redemption.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, cool. Have I not been screen sharing this whole time? I thought I was.
You've been screen
No,
sharing.
you were.
You were.
Yeah.
Oh, he's co-host, so he can knock me off. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, then I will go back to screen sharing. Okay, cool. All right, forward-looking strategy scope for Gateway API. This one is,
Yeah, no. So one of the things I've been thinking about is, the project has been going for a while, and I think it would be helpful to try to spend some time in the next few weeks to start thinking about where we want to be a year from now, basically as a project, things we want to achieve, the things that are most important to us. I have lots of ideas, but I don't want to just start a doc on my own. I wanted to see what others are thinking about, what's top of mind, what's highest priority, and have this be more of a collaborative effort. So there's not much, that we have to discuss today, but I just wanted to start getting this in people's minds. If you have ideas, if you have things, I really want, X feature in Gateway API, and I want it to be beta by the end of the year or whatever that is. I'd love to hear about that, or whether maybe it's just I really want this level of adoption, or I want policy attachment to succeed. I don't know. There's any number of things. I'm not sure the best way to kind of track these ideas, as we're just kind of starting out. If you have things that you'd really like to focus on, or like to see the community focus on, maybe just mention it in Slack to get started. And then eventually we can start working on a doc and include that on the website at some point, so that when people are asking what our vision is, what we've got coming up next, we have a kind of centralized place to point them. But yeah, that's all I had here. If anyone has anything they want to call out right now, that's great. Otherwise, we can just follow up async. Oh, and Micaiah is asking a good question in chat. It can be big new ideas, but we already have so many ideas that are circulating that we haven't seen get all the way through. I am personally most interested in just getting existing ideas through, but I don't know. I am not the only or final arbiter of anything. So definitely, if there's something like that you want to see succeed, bring it up.
Yeah,
I lean a little bit the other way. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, maybe this is a thing that we can spend a bit of time discussing in our sort of open office hours session next week, if we don't have any other questions. I think Rob was saying that he was biased towards not to finishing out things, not focusing on big new ideas.
Oh, okay. I had it backwards. My apologies.
Yep. I mean, I think that we should finish up a bunch of the other stuff we're working on too. Like, yes, I think that stuff like policy attachment really needs further fleshing out and implementation by people, and things like that is a good example.
In that case, I do not go the other way. That's
and Bowie already said he was also a plus to finishing things out. Well, to having a bias towards finishing things.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, have it. So I would say to people, have a think about that. Then maybe we can live create a doc next week as part of the office hours, if we don't have other questions to take up the time.
Sounds good to me. My big thing I want to see for 2023, which is already something, but I want to see it prioritized more, is the beta releases of TCP and UDP Route. UDP Route being the probably more contentious one.
Yeah, I'd be a huge fan of that.
All right. Well, if nobody else has anything else they want to bring up, we have like a minute. So if you have like just something you want to shout out, feel free. Otherwise, we'll either go to the next one or take it async in Slack. Cool. Thank you all for coming. Is next week when we're doing next week's the office hours one?
Next week is the office hours. Yeah.
Reminder for everybody that next week it's going to be kind of free form town hall office hours, kind of just open agenda kind of style. So please feel free to come with things in mind, but otherwise we can just hang out and chat.
Yep.
Thank you all, and have yourself go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we won't put an actual agenda. We will make agenda items as we start the meeting and as we talk about them.
Roger that. Thank you, everybody. Have a good week.
Yep.